Derek Ball.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise on behalf of New Zealand First to speak on the Social Security Extension of Young Persons Services and Remedial Matters Amendment Bill. And New Zealand First will be supporting this bill at this stage because New Zealand First fundamentally agrees with the purpose, the aim and the intent of the bill. I don't think there's any question from anybody, including the submitters or any other opposition party, that the intent, purpose and aim of the bill we will support, because what it is fundamentally is that youth in need are getting more support. But it's not about, so we do have some concerns that I'll be going over, sir, but the concerns aren't with the what. So the what is the fact that the youth service, or the extension of the youth service, aims to improve the educational and social outcomes for young beneficiaries. And when that occurs, they'll be getting some wraparound support, including youth coaching, services such as budgeting help and parenting courses as well, which are all good things, and New Zealand First supports that, sir. We also support the fact that there are some obligations put on to beneficiaries, because this isn't a handout, it's a hand up in a time of need. New Zealand First understands that. It's a social contract, and with any contract there are obligations, and New Zealand First supports those, sir. But we're talking about positive obligations for the youth, for the outcomes of the youth, especially things like them being subjected to money management, sir. But it's not, like I said, it's not about the what, sir. The what is good, but it's about the how and why. So if we look at the heart of what the legislation is trying to change, which is the extension of the youth service to all 19-year-old beneficiaries with children, that's the what. We agree with that. But the problem that New Zealand First has fundamentally with that is the fact that all it is increasing the number or the size of the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. That's all that it is. And actually it's an indirect admission by the government after 8 years of being in government that the system is failing. So if the system was working, and if the investment approach that the government was taking was working, then there would be no need to extend the youth service. The youth service will be working. Apparently it is, by the government standard, it is already. But how can that be if you need to extend it? It doesn't make sense, sir. And the issue is that the government is refusing to address the actual reasons why the youth get onto the benefit in the first place. So we talk about the fact that the youth are on the benefit, are doing well, and youth service, according to the National Party, is doing well, so we need to expand it. But we always talk about why the youth were put on the benefit in the first place. Where's the preventative measures and the legislation and the policy and the principles and the ethos and values from the government that would stop our youth getting onto the benefit in the first place? And it's been mentioned before, but we're talking about the fact that New Zealand has a very, very high youth unemployment rate. I mean, we've just seen in the last statistics in New Zealand, the last quarter, unemployment has actually risen overall, but especially with the youth, and especially within the regions. We're talking about Northland is 8.5%. We're talking about Gisborne, 8.5%. Now Manawatu, Wanganui Manawatu is 7.7%, which is now the second highest rate in the country. And we've had the highest increase in unemployment has been the West Coast, actually, sir, which is about 1.5%. We've heard about the NEET rates. So we've got 87,000 youth who are disengaged with society, not just out of employment or education, but they're actually disengaged with everything in society. That's over 12%, close to 13%. And as has been mentioned, it's never been below pre-2008 levels. So apparently that's a success for the government. And the government can't be talking about, well, we've gone through a rough period of the GFC and anything like the earthquake. Because apparently the global financial crisis ended, according to Bill English, ended in 2012. So, what has this government been doing? That is not success. You're talking about the issues with social issues with the youth, you're talking about jobs, education issues and health issues. And the government hasn't done anything to do to solve those problems in 8 years. And that is the same approach that we have just heard in the last week or two from the social housing minister saying that, announcing that we've got some more funding for emergency houses. That's not a good thing. That's not a positive announcement, because what that is doing is that it's demonstrably showing that the safety net has failed, that this government is supposed to have a social obligation to ensure that that safety net is strong and to catch people, and people are falling through and becoming homeless. And to come out and announce that they're going to invest more money into emergency housing is an admission of failure. It's an admission of failure, and it's the same approach that this government is having with this piece of legislation, sir. And I'd like to use an analogy about what this government is doing to solve the youth unemployment issue and the issues with youth on NEETs. They are taking the approach of emptying a sink full of water with a teaspoon without turning the tap off first. That's what's happening. And what they're doing by trying to increase the wraparound services or the youth services to include 19-year-olds, they're changing that teaspoon to a tablespoon. That's all that's going to happen. It's not going to solve any of the issues. It's not going to solve any of the issues. It will continue, just like the previous 8 years. The other main thing that this legislation is doing, sir, is 18 and 19-year-old beneficiaries without children who are considered to be at significant risk of long-term welfare dependency. And I know that we've heard it previously and a few of the other members talking today, but that brings into discussion the predictive models, sir, and the risk predictive models that you're using. So it states that some submitters asked how the risk of long-term welfare dependency would be assessed. We've got an issue with the way that the risk predictive models are being utilised to assess the youth, sir. And another analogy that sort of encompasses, because on the face of things, using a risk predictive model and using the investment approach, Joe and Jane Bloggs would actually look at it and think that it sounds logical. But if I could use an analogy, sir, if we, for example, are trying to target millionaires, and the predictive model says that all people who drive red cars are millionaires. So the indicator that we're looking for are red cars. So if all people who drive red cars are millionaires, that doesn't necessarily mean all millionaires drive red cars. So what that's going to do is that we're going to use a predictive model, we're going to use a criteria, we're going to use a tick box to try and predict these, they're not just youth, but the adults, so 18 and 19-year-olds, how they will be a long-term financial liability on the state. And this is all got to do with the investment approach that the government and that we have had legislation go through just recently about putting the investment approach and the entire purpose of the rewrite of the Social Security Act. And everything that, including this legislation, and this just is a demonstrable fact of that, is that everything has to relate back to the investment approach. And just in the departmental disclosure statement, sir, in regards to the risk modelling, and this is the Ministry's own comments, so MSDs, the risk model for the youth service extension is still in development and will be finalised prior to implementation of the youth service in August 2016. So first of all, it's still in development. I'm not sure what the backbenchers of the government are talking about, or the minister is talking about, when they are happy with the development of the risk modelling and they know that it works. But the worst thing, sir, is the fact that the existing model used for youth services is based on the needs, how they assess the needs. And we've just heard that in the last 8 years, it's never been lower than the pre-2008 levels. We have had record increase rates in the last quarter of young unemployed males. It's going up, sir. It is not being solved by this government, and yet this government wants to use that same predictive model that they use for NEETs for this legislation. So it's still being developed, and it has demonstrably failed in the existing model, sir. There are a number of issues that New Zealand First have with this legislation, sir, but we do agree with the intent, and that's why we will be supporting it at this stage, sir. I think that the committee stages and the third stage will be an interesting discussion, and hopefully we can get some resolution for the concerns that New Zealand First has, but we will be supporting at this stage, sir. Thanks.